When I was a boy, there was this TV show airing after school that everyone watched. It consisted of teenagers in brightly coloured spandex punching and kicking thin air as they threw themselves to the ground, sparks flying from their bodies. I'm talking about Power Rangers, if you hadn't realised. Everybody loved the show. Except me. Well, I say that, but I never actually watched Power Rangers. My mummy wouldn't let me. She said it was too violent for my little mind. What a good mother. Of course, as I grew up, I did watch violent shows. And I don't think it's done any harm. I mention this because I want to discuss my favourite manga series of all time, Berserk. Its story both revolves around and is enriched by violence. There are few shows so intensely gripping and incredibly deep. It is both a ridiculously over-the-top action series and a down-to-earth narrative-driven story. There's something for everyone in Berserk, I thought to myself as I wrote the script for this video. Edgy, badass main character, ridiculously impractical weaponry, a villain that can be hated, and, above all else, a deeply sympathetic main character that you can relate to. Berserk, by Kentaro Miura, tells the story of a mercenary named Guts, as he tries to make his way in the world. And oh boy, things get violent. Guts experiences many hardships and tragedies throughout his journey. But all of these events are important in constructing that oh so important tone. Have you ever tried to explain your love for the series to anyone, or any series with similar themes, and have them reply, "It's too violent, it's gratuitous"? And of course, you reply, "Shut up, that's dumb, you're dumb, Berserk is not too violent, it's awesome." Alas though, we can't solve all our problems with blind yelling, so why don't we look into this and make an objectively logical and sound argument that can be used to rationalise something we find subjectively good. What is it about violence that is so important to Berserk? Or, in other words, why the tone of Berserk is so important? Of course, as a fan of anything, you'll probably feel compelled to defend your favourite shows at some point. Be it Berserk, Attack on Titan, Game of Thrones, or any other show with violence. There will always be some saying it's too violent, but I'm here to argue otherwise. The first thing we have to realise before we continue is that everything that happens in a film, book, or any story really, is done to manipulate you. At the end of the day, we're just sitting still, staring at a screen or piece of paper. You're not really doing much. A good writer will design their story to make you forget this, and feel certain ways at certain points. All writing is manipulative, no matter what it is. Be it the tragic death of a beloved character, or the swelling of the music as our heroes attain victory. All of it is done to manipulate you. And they call me cynical. Ridiculous. But there is a difference between the right way to control your audience and the wrong way. Don't play sad music when a character we barely know dies, as we'll feel absolutely nothing and simply end up rolling our eyes. Do slowly develop your character, allowing us to understand and relate to them before their untimely death. The sad music in this case only enhances the experience. But where does this leave us? Well, if everything is done to manipulate you, there must be a reason. So, what is the reason for the insane violence of Berserk, or any story in a similar vein? By saying something is gratuitous, people mean it is without reason, it's pointless. Well, there is a reason for Berserk's rampant destruction outside of the rule of cool. An explanation for this violence at a deeper, more artistic level. By seeing this terrible destruction, a very specific kind of world is made. A world where bad stuff happens all the time. Tone is a word often thrown around when analysing or reviewing media. Basically, the tone of something is the expression of the writer's attitude towards the subject matter. In this case, Kentaro Miura uses the hyper-violence of Berserk, while cool at a surface level, to show you how brutal the world of Berserk truly is. This has two functions: the negative of creating this grim world where you expect hardship to befall our characters, and the positive which allows us to appreciate those small moments of kindness when they do actually happen. It's all about creating and convincing us of this world. It allows us to understand that characters will die and there will always be a threat for our hero to fight. In this story, anything can happen. We're not bound by the usual constraints of a story. All of this is thanks to the tone of Berserk. As I mentioned in my Dark Souls video, this is a view on philosophy that Democritus embodied way back in ancient Greece. The idea to accept misery to better appreciate happiness. Those small moments of quiet become most valuable to us because they are surrounded by the dark tone. Berserk is set in medieval times, and I'm sorry to say this, but that's sort of the way things were in those days. People would die all the time and in gruesome ways, believe it or not, but this hyper-violence adds realism to Berserk. And even when you're faced with a gigantic demonic monster, it still feels real since this is the world that has been built. If there wasn't this continuously dark violence that Guts lives in, none of us would care. Not because we'd miss the action, though that would be a factor, rather there would be no struggle. And that's the whole point of Berserk. To struggle against overwhelming odds and still survive. Guts must go through hell and come out the other side for his journey to mean something. Berserk has a very nihilistic philosophy. After all, much of the plot revolves around the idea of causality. But the characters still struggle onwards. Without this dark tone, they would have nothing to struggle against, nothing to overcome. Miura, by creating a story full of violence, has created the greatest villain of all for our characters to overcome, the world itself. In short, if there wasn't this violence, the struggle of the characters would be meaningless. As I said, these brief moments of peace are valuable to us because they are not the norm. There are many lessons and morals to be learned in Berserk, but one of the most interesting conversations to be had is that of consequentialism, a fancy way of saying the consequences for one's actions are the ultimate basis for morality, i.e., the ends justify the means. After the events of the eclipse, it's fair to say that Griffith is basically hated by every single rational person in existence, hence why the phrase, "Griffith did nothing wrong," is so bone-breakingly enraging that most of us can't contain ourselves when we hear it. But after Griffith reobtains a physical body, he effectively ends all war and creates the utopia known as Falconia. Granted, it's a little fishy and there isn't much freedom to go around, but for the most part, humanity can enjoy an unrivaled era of peace, safe from the trolls and the ogres of the world. The question on everyone's lips, of course, is, did the ends justify the means? Did Griffith's actions during the eclipse really justify the ends of a supposed utopia? The answer? No, it doesn't. At least, not in my eyes. But the meme of Griffith did nothing wrong is so infuriating because there is something there. The mere existence of this conversation means it has value to it. Sometimes sacrifices are necessary to create a better world. Griffith may have killed the entire band of the Hawk bar Guts and Casca, but he is potentially saving hundreds, if not thousands more by ending the war with the Cushions and creating Falconia. Consequentialism and moral relativism are not easy topics to discuss, but they are important topics. Humans love to think of objective morals such as right and wrong, but more often than not, the line is blurred. The difference between Guts, the protagonist, and Griffith, the antagonist, is a fine one. They're both skilled fighters, they both have an iron will. They have both done terrible things to get by in the world, but one is hated and one is loved. Whether Griffith did nothing wrong or not is a conversation that couldn't exist without the violence and dark tone of Berserk. Without the tone, we wouldn't see what effect Griffith's actions would have on the world, and without the violence, well, we wouldn't have Griffith's actions at all. This tone allows us to view the story and make up our own mind. This violence may be hard to look at, it may be hard to swallow, but it's not just there to offend you, it's there to challenge both you and the characters. Remember, whether it's an artistic reason to suck you into the world, or a philosophical reason to pose an interesting question about morality, or simply because it looks cool, the dark tone of a story is often inseparable from the violence and the characters of the world. We must be challenged by art. So the next time someone tells you your favourite show has gratuitous violence, you can tell them how important it really is. You have every right to enjoy your story, whatever it is. Thank you for watching my video on Berserk. If you enjoyed it and would like to see some more, then why not consider subscribing? Leave a comment and let me know what you think. Like or dislike as you please, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye! Oh, and just for the record, Griffith did everything wrong.